Hey guys, so in today's video I am going to be reading Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban as an audiobook. So there are 22 chapters, which means 22 series. But anyway, my reading's not the best, but I'm still pretty good. And in the first chapter there is about 16 pages. Yeah, about 16 pages. So sit back and relax as I suffer trying to read this. Harry Potter was a highly unusual boy in many ways. For one thing, he hated the summer holidays more than any time of the year. For another, he really wanted to do his homework, but was forced to do it in secret in the dead of the night, and also happened to be a wizard. It was near midnight, and he was lying on his front bed, the blankets drawn over his head like a tent. A torch in one hand and a large leather-bound book, a History of Magic by Bartha Bagshot, propped open against the pillow. Harry moved the tip of the eagle-feathered quill down the page, following as he looked for something that would help him write his essay, which burning in the 40th century was completely pointless. Disgust. The quill paused at the top of a likely-looking paragraph. Harry pushed his round glasses up his nose, moved his torch closer to the book, and read. Non-magic people, more commonly known as muggles, were particularly afraid of magic in medieval times, but not very good recognizing it. On a rare occasion, they did catch a real witch or wizard. Burning had no effect whatsoever. The witch or wizard would have performed a basic flamey freezing charm and then pretended to shriek with pain while enjoying a gentle trickle sensation. Indeed, Wendlin the Weird enjoyed being burnt so much she allowed herself to be caught no fewer than 47 times in various disguises. Harry put his quill between his teeth and reached underneath his pillow for his ink bottle and rolled off the parchment. Slowly and very carefully, he unscrewed the ink bottle, dipped his quill into it and began writing. Paused every now and then to listen, because if any of the Dursleys heard him scratching the quill on their way to the bathroom, he would probably find himself locked in the cupboard under the stairs for the rest of the summer. The Dursley family of number 4 Privet Drive was the reason that Harry never enjoyed summer holidays. Uncle Vernon, Aunt Petunia, and the son Dudley were Harry's only living relatives. The Muggles, and they were Muggles, and they had very medieval attitude towards magic. Harry's dead parents, who had been a witch and a wizard themselves, were never mentioned under Dudley's roof. For years, Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon had hoped that if they kept Harry as downtrodden as possible, they would be able to squash the magic out of him. To their fury, they've been unsuccessful, and now lived in terror of anyone finding out Harry had spent most of the last 2 years at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The most Dudleys could do these days were to lock Harry's spellbook, wand, cauldron and broomstick at the start of the summer holidays and forbid him to talk to the neighbours. The separation from his spellbook had been a real problem for Harry because his teachers at Hogwarts were giving him lots of homework. One of the essays, a particularly nasty one about shrinking potions, was for Harry's least favourite teacher, Professor Snape, who would keep delighted to have an excuse to give Harry detention for a month. Harry had therefore ceased his chance in the first week of the holidays. Uncle Vernon, Aunt Petunia and Dudley had gone out into the front garden to admire Uncle Vernon's new company car. In very loud voices, so that the rest of the street would notice it too, Harry had crept downstairs, picked the lock on the cupboard under the stairs, grabbed some of his books and hid them in his bedroom. As long as he didn't leave spots of ink on the sheets, the Dursleys needed never know that he was studying magic by night. Harry kept to avoid trouble with his aunt and uncle at the moment, as they are already in bad mood with him, all because they've received a telephone call from a fellow wizard 1 week ago in the school holidays, Ron Weasley, who had one of Harry's best friends at Hogwarts, came from a whole family of wizards. This meant that he knew a lot of things that Harry didn't, but had never used a telephone before. Most unlikely, it had been Uncle Vernon who had answered the call. Vernon Dursley speaking. Harry, who had happened to be in the room at the time, froze as he heard Ron's voice answer. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? I want to talk to Harry Potter. Ron was yelling so loudly that Uncle Vernon jumped and held the receiver a foot away from his car, staring at it with an expression of mild fury and alarm. "Who is this?" he roared in the direction of his mouthpiece. "Who are you?" "Ron Weasley," Ron bellowed back, as though he had and Uncle Vernon were speaking from opposite sides of a football pitch. "I'm a friend of Harry's from school." Uncle Vernon's small eyes swiveled around to Harry, who was rooted to the spot. "There is no Harry Potter here," he roared, now holding the receiver at his arm length, as though he had frightened it may explode. "I don't know what school you're talking about. Never contact me again. Don't you come near my family." And he threw the receiver back onto the telephone as if dropping a poisonous spider. The row had followed had been one of the worst ever. "How dare you give this number to people like you?" Uncle Vernon roared, spraying Harry with spit. Ron obviously realised that he'd got Harry into trouble. Because he hadn't called again, Harry's other best friend from Hogwarts, Hermione Granger, hadn't been in touch either. Harry suspected that Ron had warned Hermione not to call which was a pity because Hermione, the cleverest witch in Harry's year, had Muggle parents, knew perfectly well how to use the telephone, and would probably have enough sense not to say that went from that blah blah blah, not to say that she went to Hogwarts. So Harry had no word from any of his visiting friends for 5 long weeks. And this summer was turning out to be almost as bad as the last one. There was just one very small improvement. After swearing that he won't use her to send letters to any of his friends, Harry had been allowed to let his owl, Hedwig, out at night. Uncle Vernon had given in because of the racket Hedwig was making if she was locked in a cage for all the time. Harry finished writing about Wedlin the Weird, and paused to listen. The silence was in a dark house of a broken, only distant, grunting snores of the enormous cousin Dursley. It might have been late. Excuse me. Harry's eyes were itching with tiredness. Perhaps he'd finish his essay tomorrow night. He replaced the top of the ink bottle, put the old pillowcase from under the bed, put the torch, a history of magic, his essay, quill and ink inside it, got out of bed and hid the lot under a loose floorboard under his bed. Then he stood up and stretched and checked the time on the luminous alarm clock on his bedside table. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. Harry's stomach gave a funny jolt. He had been 13 years old without realizing it for a whole hour. Yet another unusual thing about Harry was how little he looked forward to his birthday. He had never received a birthday card in his life. The Dursleys had completely ignored his last 2 birthdays, and he had no reason to suppose that they would remind this one. Harry walked across the dark room and past Hedwig's large, empty cage to open the window. He leant out on the sill, the cool night air pleasant on his face after a long time under the blankets. Hedwig had been asleep for 2 nights now. Harry wasn't worried about her. She had been gone this long before, but he hoped that she would be back soon. She was the only living creature in this house who didn't flinch at the sight of him. Harry, though still rather small, skinny for his age, had grown a few inches over the last year. His jet black hair, however, was just as it always been. Stubbornly untidy, whatever he did to it. The eyes behind his glasses were bright green, and on his forehead, clearly visible through his hair, was a thin scar, shaped like a bolt of lightning. Of all the unusual things about Harry, this scar was the most extraordinary of them all. It was not the Dursleys had pretended for 10 years and silver of a car crash that killed Harry's parents because Lily and James Potter had not died from a car crash. They had been murdered. murdered by the most dark wizard for 100 years, Lord Voldemort. Harry had escaped from the same attack with nothing more than a scar on his forehead, when Voldemort's curse instead killing him and rebound upon its auguria, barely alive. Voldemort had fled, but Harry had come face to face with him since at Hogwarts, remembering their last meeting, and stood at the dark window. Harry had to admit he was lucky even to have reached the 13th birthday. He scanned the starry sky for a sign of Hedwig, perhaps snoring back to him with a dead mouse dangling from his beak, expecting praise. Gazing absently over the rooftops, it was a flew seconds before. Then Harry realised what he was seeing. Still housed against the golden moon, a glowing larger even every moment, was a large, strangely top-sided creature, and it was flapping in Harry's direction. He stood quite still, watching it sink lower and lower. For a split second, he hesitated, his wand on the window latch, wondering whether to slam it shut. But then the blizzard creature snored over one of the street lamps of Privet Drive, and Harry realised what it was, leapt aside. Through the window snored 3 owls, 2 of them holding up the third, which apparently was uncautious. They landed with a soft flump on Harry's bed, and in the middle owl, which was a large grey, kneeled right over and laid motionless. There was a large package tied to his legs. Harry recognised the unconscious owl at once. His name was Errol, and he belonged to the Weasley family. Harry had dashed to the bed at once, untying the cords around Errol's legs, took off the parcel, then carried Errol to Hedwig's cage. Errol opened one burly eye, gave a feeble hoot of thanks. He been to gulp some water. Harry turned back to the remaining owls. One of them, the large snowy female, was his own Hedwig. She too was carrying a parcel, and looked extremely pleased with herself. She gave Harry an affectionate nip with her beak, and removed her bundle and flew across the room to join Errol. Harry didn't recognise the third owl, a handsome, tawny one, but he knew at once where it had came from, because in addition to the third parcel, it was carrying a letter bearing the Hogwarts crest. Harry had relieved this owl of its post. It ruffled its feathers importantly stretching its wings, and took off through the window into the night. Harry sat down on his bed, grabbed Errol's package, ripped it off and a brown paper, and discovered a present wrapped in gold. And his first birthday card. Fingers trembling slightly, he opened the envelope. 2 pieces of paper fell out, a letter and a newspaper cutting. The cutting had clearly came out of a wizard newspaper, the Daily Prophet, because the people in the black and white pictures were moving. Harry picked up cutting, smoothed and read. Ministry of Magic employees scoop grand prize. Arthur Weasley, head of the Ministry of Misuse of Mogul Artifacts, Office of the Ministry of Magic, has won the annual Daily Prophet Grand Prize. Draw. A delight, Mr. Weasley told the Daily Prophet, we would like to spend the gold on the summer holiday to Egypt, where our eldest son Bill works as a curse breaker for Gringotts Wizarding Bank. The Weasley family have been spending the month in Egypt, returning from the start of the new school year at Hogwarts, which 5 of the Weasley children currently attend. Harry scanned the moving photograph and a grin spread across his face as he saw all of the 9 Weasleys waving furiously at him, standing in front of the large pyramid. Plump little Miss Weasley, tall, balding Mr. Weasley, 6 sons and 1 daughter. All, though the black and white picture didn't show it, the flaming red hair right in the middle of the picture was Ron. Tall and gangling with his pet rat Scabbers on his shoulder and his arm around his little sister Jenny. Harry couldn't think of anyone who deserved to win a large pile of gold more than the Weasleys, who were very nice and extremely poor. He had picked up Ron's letter and unfolded it. I'm sorry this is taking way too long. My reading's absolutely terrible. Dear Harry, happy birthday. Look, I'm really sorry about the telephone call. I hope the Muggles didn't give you a hard time. I asked my dad. He recons I should not have shouted. It's brilliant here in Egypt. Bill's taken us all around the tombs, and you wouldn't believe the curses the old Egyptians wizard put on them. Mum wouldn't let Ginny come in the last one. There was all of these Muppet skeletons in there. Muppet skeletons in there of Muggles who'd broken the ground of extra heads and stuff. I couldn't believe it was when Dad won the Daily Prophet draw. 700 galleons. Most of it's gone on this holiday. They're going to buy me a new one this next year. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. We're at page 10. We still got about about 6 pages left. So I'm going to end it there. I'm so sorry. My reading's absolutely awful. I'll just say it there. Alright. And I'll see you all in the next video.